This is my confession. Hey guys, Sky here. You know, I really like that new Avatar movie that definitely just released for the first time. I definitely haven't been sitting on this video idea for a while. There's already been a lot of criticism and discussion about how little screen time and narrative importance the rest of Team Avatar gets compared to Aang, but I'm actually extremely glad this is the case. The movie is called Avatar Aang, after all. This story is focused on him and doesn't really have the bandwidth to cover the size of the full cast like the show does. They even shoehorned in some character moments to appease the fans to middling degrees of success.
I'm fighting for the peace of all nations!
That's not to say they couldn't have told a story that does justice to all members of Team Avatar, they totally could have, but that just wasn't the intent here. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. The real reason that this movie is about Aang and no one else. I am and will forever be a Legend of Korra apologist, but there's, let's say, a subset of Avatar fans who simply hate Korra and her show. Most of this stems from, oh shit, how'd that get there? The only talking point Korra haters ever gravitate towards is that she's worse than Aang, power scaling wise, which is just, okay, first that's just wrong. Like we know that's wrong. Korra iconically moves like a demon, and second, since when has power scaling been the bar for good writing? Dumb question, I know, but seriously, imagine how boring it would be if every Avatar was more powerful than the last. I mean, if that were the case, Roku would have been moving like Kyoshi, and we wouldn't have had a story. And that's exactly it. We wouldn't have had a story. We all fell in love with Aang because we watched him grow and struggle along with us. And Korra, I mean, damn, we just watched her struggle. You see, most people miss the point that where Aang struggled, Korra excelled, and vice versa. This kind of character thesis was made blindingly obvious by the central internal conflict of the first season being the fact that Korra can't airbend. Yes, this is something she overcomes, but where Aang was a peacekeeper, Korra is a warrior. Think about it, if Korra was the Avatar during the 100 Years' War, she would have had a field day during Sozin's Comet, you know? She would have made sure both Zuko's parents went missing. On the flip side, Aang would have felt right at home trying to keep balance between the mortal and spirit worlds, or just trying to talk Kuvira out of fascism over some tea. They excel where the other fails. It's because of this that I'd argue that Avatar stories are usually written to be reactionary to the previous one. So if Korra was written around Aang, then surely the Aang movie... A lot of people's main complaint about this movie is that it feels like a season of Korra condensed down into 90 minutes. It's kind of a shame that it's already been written off by some as the writer's second attempt at exploring concepts they introduced in Korra, and not many people are looking at why that is. I could defend Korra all day, but Korra detractors also have a problem with how another character was handled in the show. Of all the characters The Legend of Korra did dirty, Avatar Aang is not one of them. Anyone familiar with this debate knows there's really only one piece of evidence that's kept it afloat for like 12 years now, I don't know. This scene where Bumi and Kaya confront Tenzin about their father's favoritism towards him because, duh, he's an airbender, the first new airbender in over 100 years. People have taken the scene and ran with it, branding Aang as a deadbeat dad and saying that Korra ruined their perfect angel boy. But Aang was never perfect. 90% of the Aang content we have is from when he was 12, but even by the end of the show, Aang is noticeably changed and hardened by the war, by the stress of his role as not only the Avatar, but as the last airbender. That last part is what the film and I want to focus on. I know it's been the tagline multiple times and all, but I've still yet to see a meaningful discussion on the effect it has on the story, on Aang. Because the collective denial that Aang would favor one of his children more than the others seems to have pissed off the writers' room so much that they made a movie to remind us who Aang is.
I'm the last airbender.
More than 10 years since emerging from the iceberg, we find a very different Aang. More mature, the reality of his situation has set in. If he dies, his culture dies with him. Aang founded Republic City to bring all the nations together, doing much more than a lot of his predecessors, and yet the world still isn't complete.
Because of you, all of the nations live here, together.
All except mine.
Aang doesn't have the luxury of knowing what Korra is gonna do, and even with the eventual return of airbending, the culture still lies solely with Aang. Not many stories follow a character trying to rebuild their dead culture, something that's kind of surprising to me because there's a lot of rich character trauma and guilt to explore and overcome there, and yet I believe that it's because this archetype, if you will, is so rare that people tend to misunderstand Aang. It's this very specific kind of internal pressure that's hard to find in other fictional characters, except is one protagonist that comes to mind with a strikingly similar internal conflict and motivation to Aang.
And I will not be the last Jedi.
Okay, hear me out. As soon as I saw Aang was going on solo missions looking for lost Airbender artifacts, trying to preserve his culture, it immediately gave me Luke Skywalker vibes, traveling the galaxy in search of lost Jedi artifacts. Without saying anything explicitly, the movie shows us in the first 10 minutes that Aang has been alone a lot recently, not relying on the found family that made him strong in the first place. Much like Luke, as Aang grows older, the burden of the nature of his existence as the last Airbender has pushed him away from people and further isolated him from the rest of the world. That's not character assassination, that's life. The fact of the matter is, both of these characters are the last bastion of a dying culture, the last potential victims of a genocide long forgotten. Both of them ended the war that killed their people and are left to pick up the pieces alone. Like I said, I can't really think of another character that experiences that kind of internal pressure, and yet they both experience the same criticisms. In the same way that people can't believe this idealistic baby boy could end up being a subpar dad, people can't believe this heroic young man could grow up to be disillusioned and hardened by his burdens. If both of them had remained as idealistic and hopeful as they were when we met them, I mean, wouldn't that be crazy boring? If they just learned one lesson and never any more, no more trials, just static, that's ridiculous. No, in fact, on their path to disillusionment, to cracking under the pressure, they also learn very important things, like, I don't know, the culture they've dedicated their lives to rebuilding was founded on a basis of bloodshed and corruption? Okay, it's not quite that bad for the Airbenders, but still, Geronimo was described as an Airbender utopia during a time when Airbenders would act as peacekeepers between the four elements and were eventually wiped out by the rise of the Earth Kingdom. That sounds kind of like the Jedi and the Clone Wars, no? Gonna get political for a second, but George Lucas was very explicit in his relating the Galactic Empire to the American Empire, an institution built on the graves of ideals taken for granted, and while we don't have enough information to definitively say that that's what Geronimo was, with the Paramount executives trying to bury this movie where the villain's stated goal is to create an Airbender ethno-state with the goal of crushing anyone who they deem threatens their existence. My point is, the Jedi and the Airbenders were never as perfect as they were made out to be, and that's the point. Once the onus was on Luke and Aang to rebuild their cultures, they not only had to keep the spirit alive, but also had to learn from the mistakes of their predecessors. That's why this story exists, and that's why The Last Jedi exists. Of course, that is about where their paths diverge. As we know, Luke failed to bring back the Jedi just as Aang failed to bring back the Airbenders, but where Luke had an era of disillusionment, fully taking on the guilt of his own actions and that of his people, Aang is given a second chance through Tenzin. However, both of their obsessions with bringing back their people is what would drive them further away from those they loved. Aang really did love Taga. He was like the brother he never knew he needed, and the anger Aang shows at the end of the film, just wailing on Taga, almost losing himself to the negative spirit energy, which is kind of dumb, but regardless, it reminds me so vividly of Luke and Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi. In both of these moments, Luke and Aang almost lose themselves, and it wouldn't be the last time that it happens to either of them, because heroes aren't perfect. Neither of them are truly the paragon of virtue that people make them out to be. Or okay, maybe Aang kind of is, but that's okay. Heroes, hell, characters in general aren't supposed to be perfect, and it's the fact that in the end, despite the failure, the mistakes, and the stubbornness, that they choose to do the right thing, and that's what makes them heroes. Aang obsessing over reviving his culture through Tenzin, leaving an actual living legacy, just shows even more that if he'd never had the chance, if he truly, completely failed to revive the Air Nation in the way Luke had failed to revive the Jedi, I really believe Aang would have gone down a similar path. He would have ended up having his own Last Jedi. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Last Jedi detractors love to forget how incredible Luke's final stand is, not just visually, but on a thematic level. The man who spent the film preaching the Jedi's failings ends up embodying their ideals more than anyone in the franchise, non-violently, essentially mentally scarring the villain while giving the heroes enough time to escape and continue the fight. This scene is more Jedi than this scene. Full stop. So yeah, the Avatar movie is similar to Korra Season 2, kinda, sorta, but more than anything it's a reaction to how the legend of Korra had changed Aang's reputation. This movie is to remind everyone who Aang really is. He's not a deadbeat dad, And he's not a saint. He's the last airbender. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. This is a kind of random one, but you know, I watched the Avatar movie and I had a lot of fun. I definitely just watched it for the first time. And I had a lot of thoughts about it. I've been thinking for a while now. So I gotta stop messing. I gotta stop beating around the bush. You know, you all know it was leaks. I've been thinking about the Aang Luke parallels, and I've always loved Aang's like I've always defended Aang, prioritizing Tenzin over his other kids. But it's also not like Aang's his youngest, you know? It's not like I don't want to get into it. I just did a whole video essay about it, you know? I thank you so much for the support on the last video. That it's truly insane. Forrest posted it. Whoa. But yeah, thank you for watching. I want to talk about Star Wars a little bit again next. Yeah, so here's your Toby, of course. That's your reward for making it this far. Please like and subscribe. I'm super grateful for all the support recently. It's been going great. I'm a big fan. And I want to keep making more because, you know, it's motivating. Anyway, have a great day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.